really dig into them for the most fascinating insights. And today, we're doing something pretty unique. We're taking a deep dive into a historical medical text. Our mission, if you will, is to explore the surprising world of Carlsbad Aqua. You might also know it as the waters of the Sprudel Springs. This is all coming from William Boericke's Homeopathic Materia Medica. Now, for anyone unfamiliar, this text is basically a huge collection of symptoms and uses for different substances, all from a homeopathic perspective. So we're going to peel back the layers on what this specific water was thought to do, the conditions it treated, and some of the really specific, sometimes quite unusual symptoms connected to it.
It's a really fantastic glimpse, actually, into a different way of observing things, how they categorized physiological effects, especially the patient's own experience. And you'll find that even something seemingly as simple as water from a specific spring, when they looked at it through this lens, it was given this remarkably complex range of actions. We'll uncover not just what it was used for, but some of those very specific details that made it stand out back then. Things like sensations of flashes of heat all over, or that feeling as if cobwebs were on the face. It really makes you think about how medical knowledge was put together before, modern diagnostics.
Okay, so let's unpack that a bit. Carlsbad Aqua, waters of the Sprudel Springs. You said it gained fame mainly for its action on one organ.
That's right, the liver. Its effect on the liver was apparently quite significant. That was its primary claim to fame, you could say.
And what conditions was it really highlighted for?
Well, it was notably used for some pretty major systemic conditions, things like obesity, diabetes, and gout.
Metabolic issues, then.
Exactly. It shows a real focus on those kinds of metabolic, constitutional problems that were common. But what's really intriguing is that beyond those specific uses, when they prepared it in homeopathic potencies, which are these highly diluted forms.
Right, the dilutions.
Yeah, they believe those amplified its sort of energetic properties. And in that form, it was seen as useful for more general issues too, like a kind of generalized weakness. Weakness in all organs, they said. Also chronic constipation, and even being very susceptible to catching colds.
Wow.
It really paints a picture of a very holistic view of how it worked.
It sounds like they thought it boosted the body's overall vitality somehow. And you mentioned unique characteristics. The source talks about a notable periodicity, its effects repeating.
Yes, that's quite specific, isn't it? The effects, or maybe the symptoms it provoked, were said to repeat after about 2 to 4 weeks.
What would that have suggested to practitioners back then?
Well, that kind of periodicity suggests something more than just a quick, fleeting effect. It points towards perhaps a deeper, more sustained action on the body's rhythms or systems. And it wasn't just internal stuff. The Materia Medica also notes these really distinct physical sensations. You mentioned flashes of heat all over.
Yeah.
And also a kind of generalized itching on different parts of the body. These are very particular observations, really relying heavily on what the patient reported feeling.
Okay, this is where it gets really fascinating for me. Diving into the specific symptoms, system by system. Let's start with the mind. What did the Materia Medica say about the mental state linked to Carlsbad Aqua?
The text points to a state of being quite discouraged, particularly anxious about domestic duties, about household tasks.
No,
It
specific.
paints a picture of someone feeling really weighed down by their day-to-day responsibilities.
That is a very specific emotional snapshot. And physically, what about, say, the head?
Okay, moving to the head, it describes headaches,
Hmm.
and interestingly, these often came with visibly swollen veins in the temples.
You could see them.
Apparently so. And what's also noted is that these headaches tended to get better with motion and from being out in the open air,
Okay.
which gives you a very clear picture of the presentation, almost like a mini case study.
The description of the face is particularly vivid, I thought. It mentions different looks, yellow, sallow, or even red and hot.
Mm-hmm.
And pain in the zygomatic process, that's the cheekbone, right?
That's right, the cheekbone area.
But the detail that really jumped out at me, the one that highlights just how observational this all was, is that sensation of feeling as if cobwebs were on it,
Yeah.
on the face.
It's truly remarkable, isn't it?
What does a detail like that tell us?
Well, that level of, phenomenological detail, cobwebs on the face, it suggests just how profoundly they relied on the patient's subjective experience, what the patient actually felt and described. Unlike our modern focus, often on objective tests and biomarkers, practitioners back then were really tuning into every subtle sensation, even metaphorical ones.
Right.
It tells us a lot about the kind of data they worked with and just how meticulously they documented these sensory experiences.
It really seems like the Materia Medica left no stone unturned. I mean, even down to very basic bodily functions. What about the stomach?
Oh, yes, the stomach symptoms are also quite comprehensively described. It wasn't just vague discomfort. The source details things like a tongue coated white, an offensive smell from the mouth, even a furry sensation in the mouth.
A furry sensation.
Yes, and specific tastes like sour or salty. Plus, the person might experience hiccups, yawning, and heartburn. It's really a full spectrum of digestive upset, all carefully noted down.
And even urinary symptoms got this level of detail.
They did. The urine stream was described as weak and slow, often needing the person to actually press on their abdominal muscles to urinate.
Suggests a kind of weakness there.
It indicates, yeah, perhaps a muscular weakness or some difficulty in the bladder's function.
And did this theme of sort of sluggishness or difficulty extend further down the digestive tract?
Absolutely. The bowel issues described are also quite pronounced. The source notes that feces were held back,
Held back.
meaning stools were slow to pass and again required a lot of abdominal pressure, so significant constipation. And alongside that, there could be burning in the rectum and anus, and it was also associated with bleeding piles or hemorrhoids. It gives a really complete picture of that whole gastrointestinal situation.
So we've covered its main actions, these incredibly specific characteristics, and this whole fascinating array of detailed symptoms. What about context? Did the book suggest how it related to other remedies or typical dosages?
Yes, the relationship section, which is common in Materia Medica, suggests comparing Carlsbad Aqua with other substances. Specifically, it mentions Nat Sulf and Nux Vomica.
Okay.
These are other well-known homeopathic remedies, often considered for similar symptom patterns or constitutional types. It gave practitioners a way to, cross-reference and choose the best fit.
And the dose.
The source just says lower potencies, which in homeopathy usually means the less diluted forms.
Yeah.
This might suggest they observed more direct, perhaps more physical action from it, rather than the kind of action associated with the very high dilutions used in some other homeopathic contexts. What's really striking when you look at all this is how meticulously this single source documents such a huge range of symptoms and uses, all for essentially water from one specific spring.
Yeah.
It just underscores how deeply people back then observed and categorized the body's responses to natural things, and how central the patient's own story, their narrative was to understanding what was going on.
Absolutely. So, thinking about this, what does it all mean for you, our listener? Well, this deep dive really shows us that for centuries, people have been seeking this incredibly detailed understanding of how substances interact with our bodies. I mean, from the big picture effects on organs like the liver, right down to a feeling as specific and strange as cobwebs on the face. It's just a profound reminder of the historical breadth of medical observation and really the art of listening carefully to the patient. This exploration reveals not just one specific remedy, but it opens up a whole philosophy of observation, one that really prioritized that subjective experience and this incredibly detailed cataloging of symptoms.
And, that raises a really interesting question, I think. Considering these detailed observations from the past, focused on something as common as spring water, what other common, maybe everyday natural elements might we be overlooking now in our modern world? Elements that could hold surprising historical stories about health. Or maybe even reveal new ways to understand how subtly our bodies interact with the environment around us. It's definitely something to mull over until our next deep dive.